Thanks for jumping on this Zoom, Zev. I really, really appreciate it. If people don't know you in the movement by now, I think they've been living under a rock. You've been around for quite some time and you've been involved in a lot of really important cases. I guess many people do know you, but I don't know if they actually know your story. So do you want to share with us a bit of your background and how you got to where you are now?
Yep, sure. Look, for those that haven't heard or don't know, look, I'm 47 at the moment, and I started doing this stuff when I was about 18, 19, which was a lot of blockading and protesting. I'm not talking waving banners in the city. I'm talking proper direct action in remote areas to protect the environment and areas of cultural heritage significance for our Indigenous. So we're pretty out remote, right? Absolutely off grid, living in the bush and chaining ourselves to trees and bulldozers to protect the lands from the environment and for Indigenous purposes as well. As a result of which, because there wasn't many of us doing that, I found myself getting arrested like a lot, sometimes daily for weeks at a time. And I sort of realized that, look, I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't quite know what I know nowadays, 25 years or more on, but it was I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't caused any harm, loss, damage, or injury, and I couldn't understand why. I'm trying to do the right thing here and help the Indigenous preserve sacred lands of cultural significance and heritage to preserve and protect the environment for future generations. And somehow I was in trouble with the law for doing this, and it just made no sense to me. Um, so, with the amount of time I was spending in court, I started learning and just doing some research on my own. And then started really learning as we were blockading more and more on various actions, such as mining and logging were the main ones we'd hit. And over time, I started to learn that the way that we're told and taught what the law is and how the courts work is almost opposite to what actually goes on. The courts literally work in almost a reverse capacity to what we're taught in school and what happens in there. And as I started learning this, I started getting curious to see if what I was learning was effective. So I found myself deliberately getting arrested at some of these blockades when I didn't need to be arrested for the sole purpose of getting to experiment and learn in court and see if what I was learning was in fact effective or not. And lo and behold, it was. And I discovered that with my photographic memory, I had a bit of a knack for doing this sort of thing. And here I am, 25 years plus on, helping others to learn what I've learned from, let's say, the school of hard knocks. And for you guys watching, I wasn't always successful in court when I started doing this. I had my fair share of having the police beat me up and detain me unlawfully and getting bitch slapped and steamrolled by the courts while I was learning. But then as I got better at this, it's gotten to the point now where I haven't lost in court in 20 years. 2004 was the last time I've had a conviction put against me, and I've challenged everything: parking fines, speeding, not voting, council. It doesn't matter what it is. I've taken all of it to court and won successfully for the best part of the last 20 years. So did a lot of time in learning through grassroots activism and a lot of blockading and taking on large mining companies and corporations to preserve the land and shutting down logging operations in areas that they shouldn't be logging. And as I said, I mean, we had some of the actions where I was arrested daily, and I wouldn't sign bail. So I'd be arrested every day and lock up overnight, in court in the morning. I'd beat it in the morning and I'd go back to the blockade the next day where I'd get arrested again, be locked up again for the night. I'd refuse bail and I'm back in court again the next day. And this just became normal for me. It was just what needed to be done was getting done. And there wasn't enough of us doing that at the time. So the very small numbers of us that were doing that all found ourselves getting arrested a lot. And we kind of had to learn quickly to keep ourselves out of jail and from being hit with massive fines, just to learn what our rights were and how to talk to the courts. And nowadays I help others to learn how to do that.
There's no better way to learn than on the battlefield in the practical sense, hey, Zev?
Well, look, the bonus of people like myself and Tom that have done that to ourselves and thrown ourselves in the line of fire deliberately with no regard for the consequences just to learn. It means that the guys we're helping to learn don't have to go through that trial by fire and school of hard knocks. As we've done it. We've done the hard knocks. We've done the trial by fire. And that's what we try and do nowadays, is help people to avoid having to do it the hard way.
Yeah, and so now you've established what you refer to as warrior at law, which is where you've supporting and helping a lot of people through their legal processes, and you do various amounts of different things and approaches, or?
Look, the bulk of what we deal with is generally fines and offers to contract. We do a lot of contract stuff for people. I generally avoid family law. Like, I do help people with their paperwork, but family law is a different beast. And so as much as I do offer some assistance for some people, it depends on what the matter is. I usually leave family law alone because it's a completely separate, nothing like criminal, civil to deal with, or contract law. So, and yeah, assaults and DUI stuff, if people have cocked up, I won't help. I don't generally, as a general rule, I don't help people who have done the wrong thing. I help people who have been wronged. So when the system has failed them and let them down, or unfairly or illegally or unlawfully persecuted or punished them, that's when I step in to help people to attain remedy. But if you've done the wrong thing, then suck it up. You wear the consequences. If you've done harm, loss, damage, or injury, you provide the remedy. That is the basis of natural common law.
Yeah,
so,
I
yeah,
respect that. It's so important that we have integrity with this stuff. You're teaching people, how to protect themselves. You don't want to promote or advocate belligerent behavior in society. So
absolutely.
You've got to be careful.
It's not the stuff that people like me help people learn, and I'm not the only one doing it, is always honour and integrity and cause no harm, loss, damage, or injury. They're the basic principles that we operate under there. Learning this stuff isn't a get out of jail free card, as many people see it to be. And it's not saying we get to operate with impunity and completely outside of the law either. The sovereign citizen oxymoron bullshit that everyone gets called when you dare to question the establishment. Oh, you're a sovereign citizen. Well, no one can be a sovereign citizen because it's impossible to be sovereign and a citizen at the same time. It's a joke. And it's not that people who, have what the system calls sovereign citizen ideas, they're not sovereign citizen ideas, and it's not pseudo law. It's actual law. And what the problem is that our government's not being compliant with the actual laws they want us to be compliant with. And we've therefore been tricked and deceived into accepting roles and titles that have nothing to do with we the living. Exactly. And this is the problem. It's not that we're saying that we don't need to abide by any law. Well, we're all bound by natural, ecclesiastical, divine law, the laws of nature. No one has authority over that. So we're still operating within the bounds of the laws, just not these bullshit statutory legislative acts, which are called an act because they're not law. It's an act. It's something acting as. It's a statutory thing that only applies to a creature of statute, which is not you or I as a living man or woman.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with protecting the men and women. It's just more about exploiting us.
Money. It's revenue.
Yeah.
Access the trust, the SQV and the straw man. It's to be able to utilize that and then trick us into thinking that we are this man of straw or straw man, the person, the name, the all caps, or the ens legis creature, which is by definition a creature of statute. And that's a creature which derives its existence entirely from the law, statutes, or legal fiction. Now, we learned this shit in primary school, D. It's called the birds and the bees, when a man and a woman love each other very much, and what happens next is us, courtesy of an act of nature from our parents, from our mother and father. And just for the people watching this, notice there is no reference to the other 300 genders in that comment. Every single one of you out there has come through a female birth canal. And in order for that to occur, it requires a male and a female. And this is where we come from an act of nature. The statutes didn't create us. Therefore, we cannot be a creature of statute, otherwise known as a person. And this is where it starts to fall apart with our legislative acts that aren't law, because they all pertain to a person, not a man or woman, and they have nothing to do with the living.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just thought of something where they're artificially inseminating people. And I wonder if that's like a ploy to kind of take us away from the natural law side of things, because people are now being grown and created in a lab. So I don't know what your thoughts on that is, but I just thought about that when you mentioned.
If you've been created artificially, the reason we have these inalienable rights is they come from God or nature, because that's how and where we were, depending on your religious spiritual beliefs, God or nature pretty much covers it across the board for most. That's where we get our natural inalienable rights from. Now, if you weren't created naturally, you've got to raise the question then of who or what created you, because that's what's going to have the authority over you. That's why our hierarchy of the law works. We start with God or nature. which created man, which created government. That which we created cannot have authority over us. So if we were created by God or nature, we don't have any authority over God or nature. It's what governs us. That's our natural ecclesiastical or divine law. But then we, the people, created by God or nature, then created government. So it raises the question of how did something we, the people, create get authority over that when it's our creation? It doesn't work.
And we don't know. I mean, we've been very ignorant, I guess you could say, or up until the last years, a lot of people haven't been aware of that. And it wasn't only until, our rights were taken away, so to speak, that people started to wake up to what was really going on, which has been a blessing in disguise. But I guess in the last 3 years, I have noticed a lot of people creating these groups and, becoming more like lawyers, I guess, or going down the sovereignty path and sharing information and providing courses and whatnot. But that's kind of becoming another issue where we need to be a little bit more discerning, because I feel like some of the intentions of these people who have arose from the last few years of what we've experienced, some of them aren't in integrity or honor, and they tend to prey on vulnerable people who are unaware. Yeah.
They're only in it for the money, Dee. And look, I'll name names because I don't care if they want to come after me. We've got shysters and con men like Derek Ballog out there who are just rotting people left, right, and centre. And I believe people like that are doing it intentionally. He knows and just doesn't care that he's not up to doing what he's claiming to do. And he's cost people houses and a lot of money with his bad advice, which he's poorly trained on. And if he's watching, mate, you're happy to come after me. I don't care. He's done the wrong thing by people. He's acted without honour and integrity, and he's caused harm, loss, damage, and injury to a lot of people. He needs to provide the remedy for that. What he supposedly teaches people simply doesn't work, or he hangs them out to dry at the end. There's a lot of others that do similar. The people doing this genuinely don't know. Some of these people in this area, for lack of better words, they don't know that they're stitching people up. They're honestly, for some of them, they actually genuinely believe that they're doing a good thing and they're actually trying to help people, even though their methods or techniques might not be tried or proven. And others that know they're full of shit and don't care and are just doing it to extort money out of the vulnerable who are so desperate they're turning to anyone for help. And then they're being charged way too much for the help they're getting, which actually doesn't help them. And it ends them up within more trouble. I have a lot of clients come to me that have got poor advice from people poorly trained or educated in the law, and I've had to correct a lot of what they've done, especially with the UCC filings. I get tons of people coming to me claiming they've done their UCC, and then when I look at it, I'm horrified at what they're claiming is a valid UCC filing, because there's a lot that people are missing. That's some very high-end international law and trust law that you're messing with when you play in that arena. If you don't know what you're doing, leave it alone. Same goes for anything else you're dealing with the law. If you're not 100% across the board with your comprehension of it, don't play with it.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I was putting up videos, kind of educating people around this sort of stuff. And it's pretty much the basics. And then people ask me, why don't you do courses? Why don't you charge or whatever? I'm not in the position to do that because I don't know everything. And I'm still trying to practically apply a lot of that in my life. And that just feels so wrong for me to do that. And I could never. And I don't understand how, these people can just, without even having success in their own lives, go out and charge, money for this stuff. So
that shouldn't even be a separate matter. If you haven't got the runs on the board, you haven't had the experience, you haven't had the wins in court, whatever, then don't go telling people do this in court if you haven't tried it yourself. Now, this is when I learned something new, Dee. Like I said earlier, I would deliberately get myself arrested so I could test it in court. I had no regard or care for the outcome or the consequences. I did it as an experiment to learn. I don't care if they locked me up. I was not signing away my rights. I was not backing down. I didn't care what they did to me. I did it to learn. This is how we go. And people go, mate, we want to talk to you because you're the expert. And I go, I'm no expert. All right, I'm experienced with 25 odd years of doing this stuff, but I'm still... We stop being dead in my day. Until then, we've got more to learn.
Yeah.
And studying law and UCC and many other aspects of law I've looked into, it's a huge case of the more you learn, the more you realise how little you really know. And even after doing this for as many years as people like myself have been doing, it's just showing me how much more there is to learn. Just when I think I'm finally getting my head around something, that rabbit hole I went down just got a whole lot deeper and darker, and there's more to explore. And we just keep learning because that's just how it is. And we've got our, so-called government constantly changing the rules and moving the goalpost. So stuff that we did 15, 20 years ago just simply doesn't work anymore because they've adapted countermeasures to that sort of thing. So you've got to stay on top of it and, be on the ball with that sort of thing to keep up with the changes so you don't get caught out.
It's so true.
A lot of people out there, I see info getting around online on Telegram, whatever, it's the only real social media I'm on, giving advice about stuff that's 15 or 20 years old, which just, some of it might still work, but a lot of it doesn't. And you just have to be careful, keep yourself up to date with up-to-date information, and whoever you're learning from, whether you're, getting people like me or Dee to help you or someone else, check, have they got the runs on the board? Have they actually done it themselves, and were they successful?
Yeah. Well, I've just been referring people to you now because I feel like I'm lagging behind because I've kind of put it on the back burner.
Well, look, thank you, G. It's just time to learn, and it's practice. And a lot of people want the magic silver bullet and want me to do it for them. And it's like, well, no, I'd rather teach someone to fish than catch them a fish. And
yeah, that's the thing, Zeb. It's like we want to empower people. We want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. That's part of being sovereign, and that's part of taking control of your legal fiction, because you won't know what to do when things come at you.
And if more people learn this stuff, as they learn it, they can share that knowledge with their friends and family, who can share it with their friends and family, and before long, there's a lot more of us that are starting to learn and practice this stuff because everyone's sharing what they learn with those in their circles, and then those circles are intermingled and the circles just get bigger. And this is what we're, people like myself have been waiting to see this happen for 25 years or more. I was warning people about the New World Order back in the 90s. People don't take action on this sort of stuff until it's here, and it's affecting them personally. Even at the beginning of COVID, no one really cared about the lockdowns. And then it was like, oh, hang on, what do you mean it's affecting me? Well, now I need to do something about it, like selfish fucks. This was never about me. This was about community, humanity. For those of us who are parents, what are we leaving behind for our kids?
Yeah.
And the old famous quote that evil only exists when good men do nothing about it.
That's
so
it.
Off your knees, peoples, and do something about it.
It's definitely not over, hey? We're just having a little break, but lots happening.
The eye of the storm, I describe what we're in now as, Dee. The last 3-4 years we've seen was a test run. See what they can get away with and how they can do it. And, I describe the COVID BS as an IQ test that most of the population failed.
Yeah. Yeah, we did witness our own fellow Australians turn on us.
And what did they all do? They voluntarily were tricked and deceived into voluntarily giving up their rights in exchange for bullshit benefits and privileges afforded to you by the state, which they can remove any time as well. Why would you, when you get how this works, why would you swap your inalienable rights for benefits and privileges? Your inalienable rights come from God or nature. That is the only authority that can remove them. And the government knows this. And that's why they trick and deceive you into voluntarily giving up those rights in exchange for these benefits and privileges they offer, so long as you're a good boy and toe the line and do and say and think what we want you to think. But we don't need to do any of that. We don't even need to reclaim our rights or our sovereignty because we never lost it. It was always yours. It never went anywhere. You just didn't act on it or live within that. Yeah. And no one can take that off you. It doesn't need to be reclaimed. You just need to live a little bit differently to maintain it.
Yeah.
Many of us like you and I, Dee, were cheering when they said, if you don't do all this bullshit with COVID, you can't be a part of society. And for most of us, we all went, sweet, we didn't want to be part of that society anyway. It works for us. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that for sure.
Yeah, well, I've lived most of my life pretty much, most of my adult life has been away from that and out off grid and bush and remote areas, and my life to not be a part of that anyway. So having the government say, well, now you can't be a part of it was guys. Well, even now I'm living in Victoria, and friends said, "How are you going to handle that with Dictator Dan?" And I'm just like, I don't care what he has to say. The
Yeah,
only authority above me is God or nature.
that's it. And I think the sad part is, from the moment we're born, everything that's thrown out at us, on TV, in the educational system, completely programs us into not knowing who we really are and our true power and our true standing. And that's probably why a lot of people just gave their power away, because they don't even know who they are, and how important this is, and what power they actually hold and have. It's like the moment you're born, you're told what to do, and you just can't really think for yourself.
Yeah. I think that the only power anyone can have over you is the power you choose to give them.
Exactly.
And when it comes to the government, I choose to give them the middle finger instead of my rights or power. It's not happening. But
Yeah.
there are ways to do that lawfully and legally, and to have some proper paperwork and documents to support what you're saying. But also, having said that, for a lot of the viewers watching, you can't rely on these magic documents. I don't care where the paperwork's from or who wrote them up for you. If
Mm,
you don't have the knowledge to back up the paperwork isn't going to work for you. And that goes both ways. We need the paperwork to back up the knowledge, and the knowledge to back up the paperwork. If you're expecting you can pull out a document and flash it at the police and have them turn to fairy dust, it doesn't work like that. You
no.
need to be intimately acquainted with every word, term, and phrase in each and every one of those documents you're relying on using. So if you get challenged or questioned, you can hold your own on that. And that's something that needs to be learned. It's not something that I can do or you can do for people, D. People need to learn that within themselves, and to speak it in their own way where they're comfortable with it.
Mm,
When people ask, what's my best option for court? I'm challenging a speeding fine, for example. And I say to them, well, the best option for you, because you've got 1,000 options of fraud and deception to choose from in the courts.
mm,
So what do you comprehend the most? What resonates the best with you that you have a better comprehension of, that if challenged, you can hold your ground and wait on? And they
mm,
go, on, take this tack then. So then go with that. And that might be completely different for you or me or the guy next to you or whatever. We're all individuals. So it's got to be done in that manner. And yes, there are some basic fundamentals of law that apply across the board. But at the same time, it's an individualized thing as to what works best for each person, or each individual, I should say, for how to work that. So that's, again, it's individual choice.
yeah. And there's more than one way to skin a cat, I guess. And like you said, whatever you're most informed of is the best approach.
You've got to be comfortable in here with it to be able to stand in that and speak it properly, especially if challenged by police or courts or so-called government. But
Yeah.
if you're standing there going, but I've got this magic piece of paper that says this, but you don't comprehend it, that's not going to work.
No. Yeah, it's very true. So why don't you tell us a bit about your Queensland rail case on the 8th of April? What happened
Wasn't
there?
wasn't wasn't my case, but it's one of my favourite ones to talk about, D. And for those unfamiliar with that case, was an absolute ripper in the High Court, 8th of April 2015. If
Yeah.
people want to look it up, one of the better sites to look it up on is Jade. So if you did a search on your search bar, and please don't use Google, use anything but Google for doing anything, guys. When you do your search, you type in 8th of April 2015 Queensland Rail HCA, and then type the word Jade. Jade's a great website for looking up case law and precedents and stuff on, because it's a very user friendly way. You get the case summary judgment, the transcript, cases cited, and you can do a bit of homework on there. So it's one of the better sites for looking that up. The Queensland Rail case was a monster one, because Queensland Rail lost that case because of two sections of our constitution.
Mm,
Now, Queensland Rail, that case was against all their allied service electrical contractors, a long list of contractors and companies that Queensland Rail in the High Court for against that. Now, Queensland Rail were attempting to impose state law over their contractors and staff and employees. And when it went to the High Court, it was determined that due to the fact that Queensland Rail had an ABN and or an ACN, that they were, legally speaking, registered under the Corporations Act as a trading company or trading corporation, pursuant to 5120 or 51XX of our Constitution, which therefore registered them into Commonwealth legislation, therefore Commonwealth jurisdiction. Now, because they weren't registered to the state of Queensland and they're registered to the Commonwealth via the Corporations Act, they couldn't rely upon or use state law, because they weren't registered in that jurisdiction to operate under those laws. they were technically and legally speaking registered under the Corporations Act, Commonwealth legislation, therefore Commonwealth jurisdiction. They had to rely upon Commonwealth law, not state law. Now, the other section of our Constitution upheld in that case was 109. That's my favourite part. It's one sentence. And it says that when the laws of a state are in conflict with that of the Commonwealth, that the latter shall prevail and the former shall, to the extent of its inconsistency, be invalid. So those two sections is why Queensland Rail lost. And because of the conflict between state and Commonwealth law, 109 of the Constitution applied, which meant the Commonwealth law, due to any conflict, would reign supreme and supersede or trump the state law. And they couldn't use state law because of that. Now, if we apply that to, say, the police forces in every state in Australia, they all have an ABN. Your local councils wanting rates and all that out of you, they all have ABNs and ACNs as well. And they're all relying on state law to enforce fines and penalties and punishments on people when, according with High Court case law and precedents, which nobody other than the High Court can overturn or get around, they're in breach of High Court case law and precedents, which is quite serious. They can't actually enforce any of that. So no state law can be used by any so-called state authority if they have an ABN or an ACN. Then they come under Commonwealth jurisdiction and legislation. And most fines and offences that people commit, I'm not suggesting to go out and commit offences either, guys, are done under state law. So again, we still have to come back with, it's not a get out of jail free card. Again, our basic principles of natural common law to always live and act with honour and integrity and cause no harm, loss, damage or injury. It's basically a fancy way of saying don't be a dick and don't do stupid stuff. You know, and if we all live by those principles, we wouldn't need all these bullshit laws to restrict our rights and freedoms and liberties. Well, good people don't need law to tell them how to act responsibly. Most of us were raised right. We know the difference between right and wrong. Don't do the wrong thing. It's pretty straightforward. Now, having said that, good people are going to do the right thing because we're raised properly. Evil, sick bastards out there are going to do the wrong thing regardless of what the laws are. It's a better moral compass we need, not more laws.
Yeah, exactly. I think innately we are good, you know, like as pure children, unless someone's really gone through some serious trauma and really has a lot of anger and hate. I think, yeah, innately we have good in us, and you know, we're not just physical beings. Like we are energy and
All to us, yep.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for explaining that, Zev. So that's a really, really important case. Many can apply for a lot of...
Well, a whole host. Look, a couple of the other good ones while we're on High Court cases to use. George versus Rocket, 1990, in the High Court of Australia. It was a pearl of a case as well. So great stuff come out of that, including the trespass and stuff. I think I've got that on my trespass notice as one of the cases in the High Court that actually verifies that trespass is a criminal offence. The main kicker for me out of that George versus Rocket case, we've seen a lot of it through COVID, reasonable grounds of belief. Well, according to that George versus Rocket case in the High Court, the judge in there determined that you cannot have reasonable grounds of belief without first the facts and evidence being presented to base those reasonable grounds of belief on. Now, so for you guys that are watching and familiar with Nick Patterson, I believe you know Nick as well, Dee, that very famous video of him at the protest in Melbourne where he parted 200 police and walked off. That was the High Court case he quoted, was they said they had reason to believe he was more than 5 kilometres from his home. And Nick came out and quoted that George versus Rocket case and said, well, where is your facts and evidence to support those beliefs? The police all stepped out of his way and he walked off. There was like 200 cops there, fully surrounding him. And just quoting that one High Court case and that part of it, they all moved out of his way because they knew they can't go against High Court case law and precedents. So the George Rocket case, another one to look up. For trespassing stuff, Dillon versus Plenty is one of our most famous trespass cases in Australia. And lo and behold, that one involved the police as well. Who would have thought? The other ripper for High Court cases is the R versus Kirby case of 1956, otherwise referred to as the Ex Parte Boilermakers Association case. Now, this is a really good one for dealing with councils, etc., as well, and or the police, because this case was with specific reference to the separation of powers. Now, according to our Constitution, there are only 3 tiers or 3 legitimate tiers of what we loosely call the government in this country. That's the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary.
Mm.
And the councils don't fit into any of those three tiers, so they can't be government.
No.
Yeah, that's another way of being able to get around that. So anyone watching, look up these cases, do some homework on them, read up a bit what about the separation of powers and the Queensland Rail case, the two cases that I use and quote for most matters because they work and they've been set in the High Court. They can't be overturned unless someone challenges it in the High Court.
Can any of those be used for tolls? Any of those ones?
For tolls as well, but look, there's a lot of different options for tolls. The first one being, where's the contract?
Mm.
Now, for any of us that were born here in Australia or anywhere in the Commonwealth, in accordance with the 1890 Partnership Act, if you were born in the Commonwealth, you hold one share in the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
It's shareholder rights, benefits, and privileges to make use of what your share is paid for, such as roads. All the roads in this country, we'll leave the Indigenous land alone because pretty much everything in this country belongs to the Indigenous. But that aside, according to our so-called government, all the roads are Commonwealth roads. It's the state's job to maintain them on behalf of the Commonwealth. And then what the state does, they get a big budget from the Commonwealth, they pocket half of it, all line their pockets, and then they give what pittance is left to the local councils and say they're your roads, you need to maintain them and fix them. So if they're Commonwealth roads, as a shareholder in the Commonwealth in accordance with the 1890 Partnership Act, why were none of us consulted about the sale of our assets, being our roads? Why were none of us consulted about that being leased out to private companies and corporations, which if you look into, half of which are foreignly owned?
Yes.
So why are we paying foreign companies and entities for use of roads that we have a share in and the right to travel on?
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
So that's an easy one with the tolls. But my thing with the tolls, I have my own plates on the car, and as a result of which, I just don't pay the tolls anyway. Even when I had normal plates on the car, I still refused.
I refuse. I've like cancelled my toll tag, my account and everything.
I've told them I'm not a customer.
Yeah.
So it's an easy way to do it, guys. In quoting the 1890 Partnership Act, as a shareholder, we have the right to travel on the roads. As a shareholder, we should have been consulted. There is also no contract to outline your contractual obligation of exorbitant fees. Now, if you're really stuck on the toll, you're looking at fines and license and rego cancellation, call them up and tell them you'll pay the tolls and the tolls only, but no late and admin fees. And your $3,000 toll bill will be down to under $100. So as a worst case scenario for people, you can always do it that way as well.
I just don't know how they have the authority to actually cancel your license and rego when it's a foreign corporation that's involved. It's kind of like you owe money to someone overseas and they're going to cancel your, like, it's really a really strange thing. I don't know how they do that. They manage that. Anyway.
Well, look, it's not entirely lawful. They claim it's under the Fines and Penalties Act, depending on the state you're in as to what they call it. They can do that sort of thing. But your ability to pay a fine has nothing to do with your ability to drive. They're two completely separate matters there. They're not related, you know. And for people watching this, the toll things and traffic offences, Australia-wide, there is a 12-month statute of limitations for proceedings to commence on all traffic and COVID fines. So if you haven't had proceedings commence, i.e. you're not in court inside of 12 months of the alleged date of offence, they can't take you to court. Their time frame to do so, their statute of limitations expired. Now, if they can't commence proceedings and take you to court, they can't attain a guilty verdict. Whatever happened to we're all innocent until proven guilty? When the time frame to prove your guilt expires, we must remain innocent because they haven't proven otherwise. So if anyone out there watching has got old fines and no court date ever commenced, you can have them dropped under that statute of limitations of 12 months. If proceedings did not commence, then they can't commence. Same as with us, when you try and challenge a fine and say you want to elect to go to court, they say, oh, sorry, sir, your time frame to elect to go to court's expired. You need to do this, this, and this. That's bullshit. You can do extension of time applications at the courthouse for that and get around that. So we have that option. But if we're bound to a time frame and we're all equal before the law, they're bound by time frames to initiate proceedings as well. And they have 12 months on any and all traffic and COVID fines Australia-wide.
I feel like those little facts you've just shared is going to help so many people.
Well, that's what we're here to do, is try and help people, and just to learn that it doesn't have to be as complex as the lawyers tell you. Some of it's quite simple, like that one for old traffic offences. That's an easy way of dealing with that. That's to hold them to account to the very same laws they want to hold us to account to. Again, we're all equal before the law.
The fact that they can deem you guilty and deem you having committed something before you've even gone to court, people aren't aware of that. That's
Commonwealth Crime Acts in Section 15. It's quite a lengthy section, but there's references in there to they can't enforce fines and forfeitures, etc., in the absence of a guilty verdict. We also have the Imperial Acts Application Act of 1980, Section 8, Paragraph 12, which states similar, that all fines and forfeitures are null, void, and illegal without a conviction. So whatever happened on that note that we're all innocent until proven guilty, which is what we're all taught from an early age. When you're dealing with the courts and the law is fair and unbiased. Like hell, you're presumed guilty until you prove your innocence, which is completely backwards to we're presumed innocent until the prosecution proves otherwise. And that comes down to our old maxim of law, which states that the onus or burden of proof lies on the one making the claim. So if you're claiming that I was speeding, you need to prove it.
When you see those letters that arrive in your house, and it's from like New South Wales, Revenue New South Wales, or some kind of like agency that's fining you, people freak out and they're like, oh no, and they don't know what to do. But it's like, that's just like a threat that's eliciting an emotional response in you. But when you understand what's going on, what that actually means, when you
contract.
Exactly, yeah.
And you don't even have to open the envelope. Like sometimes I'll open them and just put them in the bin or throw them in the fire, whatever, I don't care. But a lot of the time, if I know it's something like that, I won't open it. I'll write on the front of the envelope in big red letters with a red pen, I write incorrect postal mechanics. And I write that because I don't know who the sender is and I don't open unsolicited mail. If you're not going to identify who it's from, scams are getting pretty good nowadays. I'm not touching that. So I write on the front of the envelope, incorrect postal mechanics. And then I write return to sender / trustee. And then on the back of the envelope, I write unclaimed, because anything you get from these so-called government departments like Revenue New South Wales or Fines Victoria, whatever, it always says on the back of the envelope, if unclaimed, return to. It's not yours until you claim it. Don't claim it. Then you can contact them and just say, hey, just ring it up, check if I've moved house or whatever, just checking you guys have got my details, whatever, right? And I say, oh, you've got a heap of unpaid fines and they keep getting sent back to us. And you go, oh, was that you guys sending mail? Well, if you put who it was from on the envelope, I'll open it. I don't open unsolicited mail, and I'm certainly not honouring requests for payment for unsolicited goods and services either in the absence of a contract.
Is there a reason why they don't put who it's from on there? Is that like a legal thing or?
Well, no, it's a sneaky, shifty thing, because if we all knew who it was from, many people wouldn't open it and they'd send it back. That's why people go, oh, it's got my name on it, it must be for me. Well, no, hang on. It's addressed to the all caps. It's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I wanted to ask you about this because there's a video of you circling around, of you talking to the police.
Up the fire screen right at Burley.
Yeah. So what happened there? Can you explain that?
Yeah, look, that was actually, I got to play with two of my favourite things that night, Dee, fire and the police. It was a good night. What happened was the fire twirling community up there, which I was part of starting that circle 20 years ago. They just had the 20th anniversary last year for that fire circle in Burley. It's been a regular Sunday night community event for 20 odd years. And even through COVID, they left it alone largely. But some of the crew there got in touch with me and said they're trying to stop everyone from fire twirling without a permit, which we haven't needed in 20 years. And they're trying to offer people $600 or $650 fines for the heinous crime of fire twirling without a permit, which I thought was hilarious. So I said to the guys, well, I'll come on Sunday. We'll have a fire twirl. I'll come and play too. I've been fire twirling for a very, very long time. And if the police have an issue with it, well, I'm happy to have a chat with them about it. So after doing my fire twirl, I haven't done it in a while. And it was, my fitness isn't what it used to be either as I'm getting a bit older. So if you've seen the video, I was a bit huffing and puffing afterwards. The two council workers came up to me from the Gold Coast City Council and attempted to tell me what I was doing was illegal in some way, and they required my details in order to issue me a fine. And I kind of just smiled and giggled at them and said, I'm sorry, you two, but I'm not comfortable handing out my personal private information to council workers. And they both went, we're going to get the police. And I went, yeah, okay, go and do what you've got to do, guys. Again, when you're dealing with the establishment, you must be really calm and non-belligerent. You cannot be belligerent with these, especially with the police. They love a bit of aggression and belligerence because they're into you. So if you do it with calm and love and peace instead, and just quote truth, fact, and law and ask questions, not make claims, it makes it a lot more difficult for them. And the police came over and tried to get my ID off me, which I never refused to give them. I just said to them, look, I'm happy to go through this with you, but my name's actually held under copyright, and tried to talk them through the administrative process required to attain someone's information that's held under copyright. And as I went through all this, I pulled out my folders, which I carry everywhere with me with all my paperwork. And I then went through all my UCC docs and paperwork with them and explained a little bit about what that was to the police, and that they weren't able to do business with me because of all my paperwork, which has been filed both nationally and internationally. And there was a bit above their head. They didn't quite get what I was on about, but it was made quite obvious to them that I wasn't some idiot that had watched a couple of videos on YouTube and thought I knew what I was doing. I actually did know what I was doing and talking about. And so as I went through my documents and showed them my copyright and my private agreement of security, my hold harmless, my actual UCC filing, the receipts and all that I paid for it, they attempted to tell me that I was a person before the law and pursuant to whatever section of the Police Powers Responsibilities Act, that if I didn't give them my ID, I was committing an offence. And that's when I asked the police, are you guys claiming that I'm a person? And they said, yeah, you're a person before the law. So, well, courtesy of all my paperwork here and my unrebutted affidavit, and unrebutted affidavits stand in truth and remain fact in law, no one had rebutted my affidavit, which states that I'm a living man of flesh and blood and not a person. And I asked the police if they had any facts and evidence to support their claim that I was in fact a person and not a living man of flesh and blood, to which there was silence. They couldn't respond. I gave them the opportunity to rebut my affidavit and they declined it. So in the absence of any evidence or facts to prove I was a person, which of course they can't do, and they chose not to rebut my affidavit, that paperwork then stands. And they couldn't prove that I was a person. Had them stumped. And it's a really simple way, without making claims, saying I'm a living man, you've got no authority over me, and doing all this sort of shit, to just ask, can you prove I'm a person? Put it back on them to provide proof of their claim, rather than us being silly and making claims.
Yeah.
So that was part of how that went, of just asking a lot of questions of them. It didn't take me long to realise the two police I was dealing with were poorly trained in these aspects of law and really didn't understand or comprehend much of what I was saying, but they knew that they could tell that there was some validity to it, and they weren't keen to test that too much further. They ended up, after I messed with their heads enough, they wandered off, and I wasn't finished with them. So I chased after them and served them with a notice, walked off after them and said, I've got one more for you. And I said, my copyrighted name is on that paperwork, and served them with a notice of prohibition, terms of engagement and fee schedule, and let them know that if they wish to engage in my services any further, that fees would be applicable. And I walked off. The police left everyone alone all night. No one was offered a fine after that. I never heard back from the council or the police. No fine was ever issued. It was a non-event. Nothing happened. And that's what happens when you know who you are and you can hold your own, and you have the knowledge to back up the paperwork and the paperwork to back up the knowledge. There's not much they can really do with you.
And because they're barely taught any of that stuff, it does intimidate them when you know what you're saying and know what you're doing. They don't want to have a bar of it. Hey, Zev.
Well, they don't want to look stupid either, so they won't challenge you on stuff they're not trained in or they're not educated in either. They'll just smile and nod and, try and bring you back to the statutes. But when we get more skilled of negotiating and how to deal with, with the police and the courts, so to speak. And again, we do that by asking questions, and we ask better questions. If you're not getting the answer you're looking for, it's because you didn't ask the right question. So if you want better answers, ask better questions.
That I always remember, ask king. So it's like you're the king because you're
the king who asks questions. Absolutely.
This was the UCC that you used?
That was part of it. I pulled out my CPO, my Commonwealth Public Official documents, which have been notarized as well. Yeah. Let them know that under that I have certain duties to the Commonwealth to report crimes as they become known to me. And what they were attempting to do was to breach the copyright, which would have been a hefty crime that carries $1 million penalty due to the paperwork.
Yeah.
So they weren't too keen to push the point too much with some of that, and they just weren't sure how to handle me. And look, if you don't want to be governed, guys, make yourself ungovernable. Put yourself in the too hard basket and they'll leave you alone. And that's what all most of us want, is just to be left alone, to live life in peace and honour and to be left alone. We're not doing anything wrong. I'm not out there hurting people or robbing banks or doing anything stupid like that. I'm not causing harm, loss, damage or injury to anyone or anything. Then leave me the bloody hell alone.
In order to attain that, is the UCC something we all need to do?
Look, I wouldn't say it's something that we all need to do. I certainly strongly recommend and advise people to learn about it and to get their documents done. And please, guys, if you're looking at doing a UCC, please be really careful with who you do that with. There are a lot of idiots out there who are claiming that they know the UCC really well, and I have fixed a lot of these filings for people. In order for that to be done properly, it's not just the UCC one financial filing statement. You must do the other documents that go with it, which are the copyright notice, the security agreement, the private agreement, the hold harmless. I do mine with affidavits as well to tie all the documents together. And there's a few unique steps and processes I've done around the UCC filing that makes the way that we do it a little bit different to a lot of the others. But I've had a lot of success in using those documents for various things. My number plates, for an example, for that, dealing with the police up at the fire twirling night. As a general rule, I get left alone for having done all this, but that's also because I know what I'm doing and talking about, and I can articulate that in either layman's terms to an ignorant police or in legal terms to a court if need be as well. So if you're going to go down the UCC route for you guys watching, you need to learn a little bit more about it. Watch some videos like Strawman Nature of the Cage and Meet Your Strawman. Learn a little bit about what the straw man is, how it was created, what is the SQV Act, and how did that come into play to create this back in 1666. This is all stuff we need to learn to know how they've gotten away with doing this, so we know how we can deal with it. Yeah. And all we're really doing is switching it around, changing and correcting our status with all of that paperwork, because we'll go back in time a bit here, Dee, for the listeners, to 1666, when the SQV Act was created. And the Crown at the time, as an unincorporated association, declared that everybody was dead and lost beyond the sea. The Crown would hold everybody's names, titles, and property in trust for their benefit as the beneficiary until such time as they return from being lost at sea, correct their status as the living, and make a bona fide claim for damages against their trust, against the straw man. Yep. So any financial payments that you've made is a claim for damages against the trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's all for our benefit as the beneficiary. Now, what's happened over time is governments around the world have realised what a sweet wicket we're onto with the strawman thing. We can take the money out of there and send them the bill and we get paid twice. It's fantastic. So they don't want to let on that this is how it works. So over time, what's happened is we've been tricked and deceived into accepting the role and title of debtor or trustee, and the strawman has been made the creditor and the beneficiary, which is absolutely backwards. Now, how can something that's not alive give credit? It's our life force living energy that allows us to give credit or be the creditor. That's what we create and produce things with in order to attain credit. The dead cannot do that because they can't create or produce.
Yeah.
And this is why when we do our UCC dogs, Dee, we switch that around. We make the straw man, as they should always have been, the debtor and the trustee, and that's the two positions that pay the bills. We're the beneficiary, and we remain the creditor or secured party creditor and beneficiary throughout doing all these documents we're just talking about with the UCC filing. So it's a way of correcting our status, maintaining and verifying that, again, we don't need to reclaim our rights. All we're doing is making it publicly known that we're not a person. We are a living man or woman of flesh and blood, and that we hold the title and the role of the creditor or secured party creditor and the beneficiary for and of the named person, the state and or trust, which, what a coincidence, shares the same name that we, the living, have been known to answer to.
For those who've never really heard about it, what it is, from my understanding, it's like the constructs and rules of engaging in commerce that's recognized internationally. Is that correct?
Pretty much. So, look, the UCC is an abbreviation for Uniform Commercial Code or Uniform Commercial Codes, which are all set up in the US. And these are, quite literally speaking, the Uniform Commercial Codes of Commerce, or the rules of engagement, if you like, for engaging in commerce with anyone or any entity for that matter. It must be done in accordance with. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's only for America. Well, horseshit. Most countries around the world recognise and use the UCC, including many of our government departments and major banks. They all utilise the UCC filing system for different purposes as well. It has a lot of scope what can be done with it. It's not just for the financial statements. You can do liens and all sorts of stuff on there as well. You can record debts and credits and change debtor and creditor around on there and have it recognised internationally when you fully comprehend how that sort of works and how to do the paperwork correctly with proper grammar and language that is actually going to help you to achieve what you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's basically a uniform set of rules, the rules of engagement for engaging in commerce, and they are accepted in most parts of the world internationally and recognised as such. Yeah. When you go on the UCC website and do a filing, its default is United States of America for the location you're filing from. When we do the filings for people here, we've got to scroll through a list of nearly every country in alphabetical order to get from U for United States to A for Australia. There's, like, most countries in the world are listed on there. So anyone who says it only works in America clearly doesn't understand or comprehend how this works. Because why are all these countries listed on the UCC website, which are all countries that, one, use UCC and two, recognise it? Australia is one of them. And the Commonwealth of Australia is registered in Washington.
Exactly. So, that was going to be the next thing I was going to say.
Our Queensland Rail case we're talking about just before there, Dee. The location of where the entity is registered is the jurisdiction it can come under. So if the Commonwealth of Australia is registered in Washington, we can use American law here, which means our USC and UCC codes are absolutely valid here. And for anyone who goes, well, how do you know if the Commonwealth of Australia is registered in Washington? It's like doing an ABN lookup here, except we call it a CIK lookup. CIK stands for Central Index Key, which is the identifying number for international stocks or commodities or companies that are trading upon or traded upon on the American Securities Exchange Commission. They must have a CIK number. So if you go online and do a search for CIK lookup, you'll get the site that comes up for that, punch in the name Commonwealth of Australia, and look where they're registered, Washington, DC. Where do we do our UCC filing? Washington, DC is where the records are held. So we're in the same jurisdiction as the Commonwealth when we do this.
Yeah. And well, so when you have done your UCC filing correctly, that essentially means that we now have control of our legal fiction and we're no longer the debtor. Is that like a good way of summarizing it?
Pretty much. We're removing ourselves in the legal world from being debtor and trustee and making ourselves creditor and beneficiary, and we're being recognised legally as the living, as opposed to this dead fictitious creature of statute, person, or all caps name. None of these entities can speak, by the way. So we can't be a person or a creature of statute because they can't speak, see, or hear.
And so the benefits of that means that they can no longer use our name for like fines or, making us pay things like registrations. What's the benefits? What would you say with having a UCC?
Well, look, the myth that I want to dispel before I answer that here, Dee, is that no, you cannot attach a credit card to your SQV trust. And anyone who's gotten in a lot of trouble or vanished, whether they vanish with a fistful of cash or so-called powers that be have made them vanish, none of us know. It's for the offsetting of debt. There's a lot of ways of going about doing that where you can offset that and your QSIP number and stuff as well. So the QSIP number is the number that identifies another form of international stock, commodity, or fund which has been traded upon internationally. Everyone's birth certificate, for example, has a QSIP number attached to it. Your driver's license, your tax file number, your ABN. There's a QSIP number attached to that via what's called a constructive trust, which is attached to your straw man. So you can look these up. I do this for people a lot, looking up their QSIP numbers for them, which is not an easy thing to do. But when you go on the right websites to look this up, you'll put in, say, the birth certificate number, and then after following that through a chain. It's like a labyrinth, the website to look this up on. When you follow that birth certificate number through, you can actually look up the QSIP number. Now, as I looked up mine and attached to my the QSIP number attached to my birth certificate had a fund with $5,740 something million in it.
Wow.
So people say this is all bullshit. How am I able to look that up if it's bullshit?
I actually did it once, maybe 2 years ago, but I didn't fully comprehend all of that at the time. And I remember seeing QSIP and all these numbers everywhere, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but there's so many numbers. And like now I think back and think, shit, that was like all the money that they're making off me.
Well, look, when I looked that up, there was that 5,740 whatever million dollars in there.
Yeah.
10% of what was on that amount was interest accrued. Now,
Mhm.
to go after the full amount is just greedy and silly. 10%, which is the interest, that interest accrued on that account, I didn't put the principal amount into that fund, so I don't have a claim over the principal that went in there. But the interest that is accrued on that account, that is interest accrued on my life force living energy, which I absolutely have the equity and I can make a claim on the interest. Now, yeah, that's only 10% of that number, which is a measly $540 million. I don't need to be greedy. That is more than enough for anything I'm ever going to need for offsetting debt. That's what I can make claims against, is the interest, because the interest is based on my life force living energy, and nobody has a claim of equity over that.
Mm.
So I can claim the interest on these via looking up the QSIP there. And there are ways, which of course they keep changing the rules about, and I'm currently relearning how to do it again, of offsetting debts against the QSIP number and authorising them with the UCC paperwork as the beneficiary and the creditor. Take it out of these QSIP numbers, or here's the fund, you guys can take the funds out of there. There's a lot of ways of going about doing that. We've got promissory notes and all sorts of other stuff we can use for debts as well. So there's a lot of ways of dealing with that. But the reason I like the UCC stuff, though, D, is because it's recognised internationally. It's To explain it another way, we have here in Australia the PPSR, our Private Property Securities Register, which is governed by the PPSA, the Private Property Securities Act. Our UCC is basically an international version of that. And when utilised correctly, we can use that as a registry that is recognised internationally to register our security instruments and our security agreement, to which we hold the security interest or the equity in. So let's say, for example, with my plates that I have on the car, and the police tried to take my car off me, whatever, for whatever bullshit reason, they can't, because I hold the security interest in that security instrument. It's like having a lien or a caveat over your own assets. If they're going to take my car, they have to pay me out for it first.
Yes, right. So you're protecting your assets and you're protecting yourself.
At the same time, and we're correcting our status as the living rather than this dead fictitious creature or entity as well. This is why we do it with affidavits, which not many people do when they do your UCC filing. There are certain ways of cross-referencing the documents, other things in there, and what we're claiming as collateral or as a security instrument as well. And if that's not done correctly, it won't help you. I've had to fix a lot of these, and seeing stupid things on UCC financial filing statements where it's got the surname and then it says SESQV Trust. That's not the name. It's got nothing to do with it. It's a completely incorrect way of doing it. The word SESQV Trust should not appear on a UCC1 financial filing statement. Okay. That's just a very silly and incorrect way of going about doing it. So if anyone's out there that have done that process, you might like to get in touch with us and have us fix your filing for you and show you how to actually do this stuff correctly. Because if you try and use this and it's incorrect, you could be done for fraud, for financial gain via fraud and deception, and all sorts of hefty charges. So it's really a case of you've really got to learn how to do this. And on that note, Dee, when we do a filing for someone with the Warrior at Law, I sit down for an hour or so on Zoom with them and explain the paperwork and the documents and the ins and outs of what we're doing, what we can and can't use it for. And then I get them back on Zoom and we file for them so they can see how I do the filing as well and explain the ramifications of. And then we've got our little sneaky tricks of how to send that information to yourself. Because remember, we have to ask the straw man if there's any objections to us switching around the titles. So what I advise people to do is to post all this stuff once you've done your paperwork. Post it from your lowercase name to your uppercase name. Send it via registered post. So we've got proof of receipt of service. And if the straw man doesn't object to being the title switched to the straw man being the debtor and trustee, then that stands. They haven't rebutted or rejected any of our documents or the affidavit. And it's a great way to do it because the dead don't object to much.
Yeah. The talking dead, apparently.
And yeah, like, it's like I did mine however long ago. I still haven't heard anything back from my straw man. It might have something to do with the fact that they're dead. They can't see, hear, or speak. Not going to have any objections. We can't be done for fraud because what does the government do? They correspond with the straw man all day, every day.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I see it is that the UCC is a means of navigating within the system and being in control of your legal fiction without having to live like a hermit. So you're attaining sovereignty, within this realm, not necessarily having to exit this realm. And it's kind of like using it to your advantage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a choice too, D. Like, I like to be in the private as the living, but there are times, a Medicare card, great example, got to go to the doctor. If you've got your Medicare card, well, for that 5 minutes, I'm happy to take my living man and creditor beneficiary hat off and be debtor and trustee and straw man and get those benefits and privileges. But then the moment that transaction is done, I put my living man hat back on and I go back to being creditor and beneficiary. We have a choice. Once you get into the private, you don't have to stay there all the time. We get the choice of where and how we can operate, what jurisdiction that we're going to live or abide or operate under as well. That's a choice. So that's a fundamental and inalienable right to be able to choose that.
It is very difficult to live completely outside of the system. So it does help us navigate through those times where we need sometimes like Medicare and maybe, studying or whatever, those sorts of things.
Yeah, well, and it's down to choice. So while hey, there's actually some benefit for me for those benefits and privileges for that 5-minute period or whatever it is, yeah, I'll take them. Doesn't mean that you're stuck there. There's nothing to say that we can't switch between. What we can't do is mix public and private. We can't mix fact and fiction, land and sea. What happens when you mix land and sea? You get mud. None of us want that. So we can't mix the jurisdictions either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you help people do this, Sev? Like we
do the filings for people. And when we do them, look, again, we do a bit differently. It's 30 or 40 pages of documentation we draw up for people. We actually do all the paperwork for people because I used to send out the templates and people just cocked it up right royally. And it took me longer to fix it than it would to just do the documents in the first place. So nowadays with Warrior at Law, we actually do the documents for people. We run through the education on what we've done, what we're doing, and how and why they work, and what you can and can't do with the documents. And then we go again when we do the filing and run through all that again, go through all the postage and justice of the peace and notary stamps. If people want to go down that road as to how to go about doing all of that to get the paperwork officially recognised and verified as a legal notice or document, courtesy of justice of the peace and or notary publics or apostilling and authentication and stuff. So there's a lot more to it to do. It's not just a matter of I've got my fancy paperwork. There's quite a process to put those documents together for people. It's very time consuming. But for me, I've been a really strong advocate for, the more people that do that, the better, because if we are challenged or offered a contract, or a fine, as the establishment calls it, I call them an offered a contract, we can negotiate the terms of that contract far better once we have that international standing under the law with the UCC codes. So we can dictate the terms and conditions as to how they can or can't do business with us. And again, by consent.
Yeah.
Consent just plays such a massive part in our laws and our rights. So we must have that. A job without consent is slavery. Sex without consent is rape. Business without consent is fraud or theft. We need consent. We must, and it must be given freely and voluntarily and in the absence of duress or coercion.
And if anyone wants to have that done through you or wants to learn more and ask some questions, how can they?
The best way is to get in touch with us via the website, which is warrioratlaw.com.
Okay.
And you can get in touch with us via the website. And anyone wanting to learn or actually do the filing, one of the areas that I, have put a lot of time and effort into over the years to learn a lot about. I'm happy to help anyone who wants to go down that road. It is for me, I believe, one of the first steps in the right direction in correcting our status and being recognised as the living and the creditor and the beneficiary as opposed to being treated as some dead fictitious entity or ens legis creature of statute that's a debtor and trustee, which is absolutely the opposite of who and what we really are. There's a lot of information out there about this. There's just a lot of idiots, sadly, doing the UCCs for people, and they're just not doing it correctly. They're not thorough. They're using very old and outdated information, material, wording, and things change over time. The UCC website where we do the filing, for example, has changed a few times in the last couple of years. Wow. There are required fields of entry that didn't used to be required and vice versa. There are certain elements and symbols and punctuation that it will and won't accept on certain parts of the forms when we fill them out that never used to be the case. I can't put a copyright symbol after my name on there anymore. But 2 or 3 years ago, I could. So they're slowly changing things. We can't put John Henry : it won't let me put the colons in a lot of places to write the name correctly in quantum. So it lets me do that in some areas. There are other areas that if you have to go back and do an amendment, you can't amend certain things. You've got to get this right first go. And that's why we do all the documents in the one hit. There's a lot of people out there who have studied under a lady named BB, and they feed people in breadcrumbs, and you've got to go on and do several amendments to your UCC to incorporate all your documents. Each amendment or filing is $30 US or 25 or $30 US. It gets expensive. Why not just do it right, do it properly the first time and get it right, and it's done. Yeah, it's a lot of work to do, and it takes a bit of time, but at the end of the day, it's one hit and you're completely done. You've got correct documents all filed at the same time, and boom, and there's your stack, and you'll end up with a little folder full of documents to carry around with you that's got all that in it.
Nice. And your process is so thorough. I haven't seen anyone cover all bases as you have. It's like anywhere that they can get you, you've covered it. Like you've got your walls up in every part.
Layers of legal security, I call it, Dee. So every time they think they're getting somewhere, it's just another stone wall for them, And
it's like bulletproof.
Well, that's because if I could find a way around it, then what's to say someone else couldn't think what I thought? Yeah. So if I can find holes in my own work, I plug the holes. And then I might share it with a couple of friends who have been doing this for a long time as well and say, can you guys find any holes? Now, when none of us can find holes in each other's work, all right, now we've got a bulletproof document. Now we can put it to use. Yeah. And then if someone does manage to find a hole in it, well, we're same as the government. We plug the holes and we move the goalposts. Exactly the same thing they do to us.
Yeah, it's beating them at their own game, I guess.
It is part of it is beating them at their own game, but it's also, look, from the martial art training and background, it's to use whatever's thrown at you to use it against your so-called opponent.
Yeah, gotcha.
It doesn't matter, in the dojo how big and strong they are. If they come in swinging at us, that's just more for me to work with. There's more for me to use and take advantage of if they throw more into that punch.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that's being used against you, we can just redirect the energy of that and have them fighting themselves. We don't even fight anymore. We just let them fight amongst themselves and sit back with our popcorn and watch. We just get out of the way, If you're not participating, you can't take damage. Yeah. It's like the government saying, come and hop in our boxing ring. We've got our guy Mike Tyson here and want you to go a few rounds with him. I'm like, fuck off. I'm not getting in your ring on your rules with Mike Tyson. Hell no. He can come and step onto my ring under my terms and conditions and my rules. I'm not playing their game by their rules. We just don't have to participate. We don't need to even fight half the time. Fighting's hard work and effort and energy, Dee. And the same as like fighting. If someone's punching, I can do all the fancy blocks and covers and whatever. What the hell's wrong with just doing this and just stepping out of the way and not participating?
Yeah, that's it. It's least amount of energy, least amount of effort, and they're the ones exhausted in the end, right?
Why aren't we doing this with the so-called government, the establishment, and the courts to just not participate and let them get frustrated while they're beating themselves up trying to work out what the hell happened? We don't need to participate. We don't need to fight. There's better ways of doing things. And that's a more peaceful way too. I'm not looking for a fight. I don't want to fight with the government. I'm just not going to participate in their bullshit and just be left alone. It's a much nicer way of doing it. It's very peaceful. And if I'm not in the line of fire, I'm not taking damage.
Yeah. And I actually see some people, it becomes like an ego battle at times where they get so caught up in like fighting the government that they're not realizing they're actually utilizing so much of their time and energy, and they're being caught in the matrix by doing so. It's like you got to keep your ego in check when you're doing these things, because then you can get caught in.
Mindset's a big part of it. If you're fighting, you're going to get hurt.
Mm.
So why not fight instead? Then you don't get hurt. Whether it's financially or physically, it doesn't matter. If you're in a fight, there's a good chance you're going to get hurt. So don't fight. And you don't get hurt. You don't take damage. It's a much simpler way of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And it's the concept, as you said there, Dee, you've got to know who and what you are. You must know your standing. You must be able to articulate that. And again, you don't have to participate in their bullshit.
Yeah. It becomes an entanglement, and you're caught up in it, and it's like doesn't get you anywhere. I've been there. I learned.
I learned the hard way myself as well. When I was in my early 20s, it was like, let's take these bastards on, let's fight them. And then as I got older and wiser and better trained, it was like, yeah, let's not do that. Let's just not participate.
Yeah. So tell us about your own registered plate for your car or your vehicle under the UCC. Tell us about that, because that's really cool. I'm sure many will be wanting to hear about that.
Let me just pull up a thing. We got share screen up. You can see this, yeah?
Yeah.
So just for the viewers watching, this is what my number plates actually look like and say. And these are my plates. Now, I've had these plates on since October, November last year, and the police will not talk to me.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's because they know it's me or because of what's written on the plates here, but I've got a friend in Sydney who's done this recently, and he's had a half a dozen visits from the police at his house over his plates. So as my friend said to me, I don't think it's the plates, mate. I think it's you, that they know that that's you and they're leaving you alone, because he hasn't gotten the same treatment. Now, people say, oh, have you? I've had police cars sitting behind me in the traffic, opposite me at the lights. I site manage a festival at Tanglewood over New Year's Eve down here in Victoria. I run the site for the guys there. Great festival, by the way, for those of you who like festivals, one of the better ones. And I have these plates on. We had 15 police on site for the entire festival, and they were complete pricks, most of them. Well, the head guys were anyway. Some of the cops are nice, but the head copper and his wife were just horrible and nasty. And they actually physically stopped my car twice while driving around the paddock doing the site work to tell me I had to put a seatbelt on, because I was in a public road-related area. I'm like, dude, I'm driving in a fucking paddock. What do you want about? And it's a public road-related area because it wasn't my job site once it became a festival. And he said, if you don't put your seatbelt on, we're going to fine you. So under the pump big time, we've got 1,000 jobs and things to build and fix and maintain there. So we're quite busy. Didn't have time to argue. I just threw the seatbelt on and continued on my way. I've done that twice, and they did not question me about my plates. Now, the first interaction I've had with the police with these plates, and I'll explain why I've done what I've done on here in a minute. Friday night, I took my daughter out to a friend's place for the night, and there was an RBT set up. And they actually stopped me at the RBT, and I got all excited, going, oh, I get to pull out my paperwork and explain. I really didn't give a shit. The copper asked me, what's the go with the plates? I said, it's private rego, mate. And he goes, what do you mean it's private? I said, it's registered privately outside of Vic Roads under international law. And he goes, oh, so they're international plates. I said, yeah, sort of. He goes, what do you mean, sort of? I said, well, you boys are familiar with the PPSR? And he's like, well, sort of. So, well, that's governed by the PPSA, and the UCC is the international version of. I said, well, I've got all my insurance paperwork and all my documents with me if you want to have a look. He goes, no, mate, it's all good. Just never seen one of these before, and I was just curious. Off you go. I was like, do you want me to do the breatho while I'm here? He goes, oh, probably we should get you to do that as well. Normally I charge for the breatho, but my daughter was late and I wanted to speed things up. So again, trying to be nice, pick your battles, guys. There was no need for me to push it when the cop was being nice and didn't give a shit. Well, I've got better things to do with my time than argue with them. I was happy to just be on my way. So pick your battles. And then he directed me to do an illegal U-turn around the RBT because I'd missed my turn off to drop my daughter off at. Absolute non-event. So to explain what I've done with these guys, and it's not just a matter of, oh, anyone can do this. Yeah, anyone can, but you need to know your shit, because I guarantee you, if you're putting these plates on your car and you live in a city area, you're going to end up with some ignorant, arrogant, belligerent copper pull you over and try and write your fines and whatever for being unregistered, which you're not. So learning how and why this is. So for a start, that number after the UCC is my UCC filing number. That's my registration, which I'm clearly displaying, So again, I'm in some way trying to show that as a man of faith and honour and integrity, I'm attempting to do the right thing here. I'm clearly displaying my registration details. It is registered privately, hence the term private. Now, vessel in dry dock, UCC 1-308. The Uniform Commercial Code of 1-308 is the short version is basically all rights reserved.
Oh, okay.
That's UCC 1308. So, vessel in dry dock. Everyone goes, why have you got that on your car? It's a car, it's on a vessel. No, it's not, it's a vessel. It's transporting me via a shipping lane. They're not roads under Admiralty law, they're commercial shipping lanes for the purpose of commerce, which again, if I'm engaging in, is done privately, not publicly. So car's not being used for commercial purposes as to why I can have it registered privately. And it registered as a vessel because when I'm on the road, which I refer to as a shipping lane under Admiralty law, it's a vessel when we're shipping. Admiralty law, all of our maritime terms apply. So you guys are used to spending time on the water and on boats like I am, the maritime law applies. Now, vessel in dry dock. The vessel is dry docked to me. It's under my command as the captain of the vessel. So I'm the authority that determines safe travelling, speed and conditions, just like I would on the water. So it is a vessel in dry dock. And the reason when I explain this, I'm travelling in a shipping lane, what happens when you order shit on eBay or Amazon, for example, Dee, from say down here in Melbourne, and you're getting it sent up to you there in Sydney and it says, please ship to? Are those goods getting on a boat or a ship?
No, they're not. They're in a...
So how are they being shipped? How are they being shipped to you if they're not getting on a boat? They're being shipped to you via a commercial shipping lane, otherwise known as a road.
Road, yes.
Ship it to you. Hence, vessel in dry dock, and while I'm travelling in shipping lanes, it's a vessel to which I'm the captain of, and it's dry docked to me, and therefore comes under my authority.
Hence the islands in the middle of the road.
All of that as well, traffic islands and all the terms that they use, yeah, exactly that. And most of it comes back to our maritime and admiralty law, which again, how can something be shipped to you if it's not getting on a boat? Because it's been transported via a commercial shipping lane. And when we do registered post, that RPP44 number, your tracking number, that's your commercial shipping lane. You've just bought the rights to use that shipping lane.
Wow, there you go.
So there's a little bit more to it for doing this. You've got to also to, again, as a good faith and honour, I have full comprehensive insurance on my vessel. So if the police try and ever tell me that you're unregistered and uninsured, well, no, I'm not. And here's my insurance papers. I've actually got the insurers to list my UCC number as my rego.
See, that's the challenge with people who want to go private in their vessel or in their automobile, is that getting insurance is that it's always been a challenge to attain that. So you've managed to even get insurance.
I've got full comprehensive and $20 million of legal liability, so that I can't be told that, mate, you're uninsured and unregistered. I'm just going to laugh at them and go, well, here's my insurance papers. And it references.
And who are you with? Who accepted that, and how did you kind of...
I done that with Amy, my friend in Sydney, I think went through Allianz or one of the other mobs. There's a few that do it. There's just a way of wording it with them. Now, the insurers too, no insurance company will insure an unregistered vehicle. So, you know, it must be registered, mate. Well, how did I get insurance?
Exactly, yeah. There's your proof.
Yeah, that's what the plates look like for the guys watching. There is a bit of a knack to doing them and a place to get them from. There is some extra paperwork you have to do to do that properly. And again, guys, it isn't a, you know, I'm trying to get out of jail free or anything here. I'm just not participating in the fraud and the bullshit and the deception. And I'm doing so lawfully. I can prove and show facts and evidence of my registration and my insurance.
Yeah.
Now, in every state in Australia, it says that the vehicles can be registered in another state. Mine's registered in the state of Washington. Again, same jurisdiction as the Commonwealth.
There you go.
Yeah, I can't say, no, mate, you're in New South Wales, it has to be registered. Well, hang on, what about people from Victoria or Queensland or the Territory or South Australia or Tassie? Are they not allowed to drive on New South Wales roads without New South Reg? Oh, yeah, how is it different?
Yeah.
This is registered in another state, but there is a bit of extra learning on doing that for guys watching going, I want to do that. Yeah, get in touch with us via the website at warriorlaw.com. I'm happy to help people learn how to do this, because the more of us that do this, the better. There can't be only one option for registering a vehicle. That's a breach of the Monopolies Act in itself. Again, here's another fine example of a so-called government not being compliant with the laws they want us compliant with.
There you go. I highly recommend that before anyone gets to that point, that they really know what they're doing and what they need to say, because we don't want people rushing and getting this done and then just getting themselves in a bad situation because they don't know how to hold their position or how to explain the process, you know? So they can learn that from you, Zev.
We're here to help people, not to stitch them up. That's the big difference. And if you're not confident to do that, guys, then don't bloody do it. If you're not confident to deal with an army of police surrounding your car and you can't stay calm and keep your shit together while you quote truth, fact, and law and ask questions, don't do this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Got to remain calm. You cannot be belligerent or get aggressive with them. If they try and arrest you and say, mate, if you don't get out of the car, we're going to smash your window, and get out of the frigging car. Yeah, go with them. Do it peacefully. You can chase it up after the fact. We don't want to fight with these guys. And the police love a good fight, especially in Victoria. We've all seen that with the rallies here, how much they love a little bit of argy-barge and to get physical with people. Don't give them the excuse. And we've both, you know, and anyone watching has seen plenty of videos of people attempting to be sovereign or sovereign, cocking it up right royally, getting aggro and having the police smash windows and drag them out of cars.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen to people like myself because we're not aggressive. We're not belligerent. We're calm. We're well articulated. I know what I'm talking about and doing, and I'm happy to say any of that to a court or a police if required, and to do so calmly. And we ask questions. We don't make claims.
Yeah. And you carry your notice with you in your car should you ever be stopped and asked for your...
I carry 3 or 4 of these these folders full of documents with me everywhere I go in a little backpack. So no matter what I'm stopped or questioned or challenged on, I've got paperwork for that I'm happy to explain and go through each and every one of the terms, phrases and statements and explain it to the police or the courts if need be as well.
And put them on notice if need be.
That is that too, absolutely. Serve them and let them know you've just been served, you're now on notice. You might like to have a read of that, fellas.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That is a good thing too, because it educates them, because obviously they're not being taught this stuff.
No, look, and so I'm not going to say all the police, but certainly in my experience, a majority of them can be quite aggressive and aggro and belligerent if you make them look too stupid. And it's not hard to do. So you need to be careful there, guys, of not doing it. Having said that, there are some really good, decent cops out there as well that have dealt with over the years too. Yeah. It's just luck of the draw. But again, guys, if you're going to go out there being aggressive and antagonize them, it's never going to go well for you. You know, I joke around with them and take the piss and joke with them, and some of them have a sense of humor, some of them don't. But, you know, it just depends on who you're dealing with on the day. They could have had an absolute shit day and having family issues. We don't know what's going on in their heads. It's like they don't know what's going on in ours. So it's best just to be nice. That's our default setting, isn't it? But most of us are naturally nice because that takes no effort or energy. You want to go out of your way to be a complete prick. That takes a lot of hard work and effort and energy. Why not just be nice? Isn't that easier?
It's a lot easier. And I do feel like, you know, behind the scenes, if they do mention people like us, they will kind of portray us negatively and refer to us as sovereign citizens. They're belligerents, you know, they want to break the rules. So they've already got this negative perception and dislike towards us. And so if we approach them in a mature, kind, calm manner, it will kind of get them thinking, oh, that's not what I was told about these people. That's not what I expected. So, you know, it's kind of changing that programming that they're instilling in them.
Yeah, and it makes them question, well, shit, what else have we been told that isn't true?
Exactly.
You know, that's where they start to go, hey, hang on a second. You know, we were told that this guy with the beard was going to do that. He's the opposite. And then it raises the, well, shit, what else were we told that was complete BS as well?
Is there anything you wanted to mention that I didn't cover? Anything that you feel is important to add?
Just look, for anyone watching this, guys, please be super careful where you get your information from. If you're going to do your UCC filing, I've only come across probably 4 or 5 of us in Australia that actually know what we're doing. So just be really, really careful with doing that with anyone, guys. Check that your information's up to date. Whoever you're learning from, do some homework on them. Check Have they actually done this themselves? Have they been successful? Have they had the wins in court? Have they beaten whatever they're claiming they can beat for you? Have they done it themselves, or have they at least helped someone close to them to be able to achieve that? If not, go and find someone like myself or Tom or any of the good other ones out there that have actually done this stuff successfully. We're not out here to rip people off or stitch people up. We're genuinely trying to help people, to help you guys learn so you can help others to learn. And this is the whole point. But, if you guys are looking at doing this, again, I'm a big proponent for the UCC because it's recognised internationally. When we file with the PPSR here, it's only recognised in Australia, and our crooked government can go and change your PPSR filings without your consent. They cannot do that with the UCC stuff. And it's recognised internationally, which gives it a much higher standing at law. So just be careful, guys. Do your homework. Question absolutely bloody everything and anyone, regardless, even me. I welcome the questions, guys. Question what I've said tonight too. Do your own homework and research on that. I'm still learning myself after 25 years or more of doing this. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm just claiming I've got quite a bit of experience at dealing with this, and I spent a lot of time studying this stuff, but I'm no expert. I'm still learning myself, and I'm happy to help others learn as I'm learning more as well. I can't stress enough how careful you guys have to be out there with where you're getting your information and learning from. Is it up to date? Has it been tried and tested? Is it successful? Are the people you're learning from or with actually ballsy enough to do any of this stuff and test it and see? And you guys have all got to gauge that for yourselves as to your best way forward there too. But just be careful, question everything. And again, if someone's making the claim, ask them to provide the proof. Proof of claim lies on the onus or burden of proof lies on the one making the claim. So get people to prove it. I can prove what I'm claiming. So if you're learning elsewhere, I don't care where you're learning it from, guys. Any knowledge is great, as long as it works and it's accurate. Can they provide proof of claim that what they're claiming they can do or use is actually going to work and or be effective for you? And if not, go and learn from someone else. There's a ton of groups out there that are teaching and helping people learn. Join up with one of the better groups and learn from there. You'll get to meet some awesome people as well.
Well, thank you for being our guinea pig,
Zev. This is part of it for me, Dee. I won't help anyone learn something I haven't done. I like to guinea pig it first and test it, just in case I did get it wrong, in which case I'll iron out the bugs so you guys don't have to do the hard yards that I've done, because I don't care if they put me in court.
Yeah,
I welcome it. So worst case scenario, they throw me in court. I learn what I did wrong. I can correct it, and then I can help everyone to do it properly.
Well, they don't even want you in court anymore, hey?
I'm barred from some, like Northern Rivers don't even let me in the buildings really anymore, unless it's my own matter. I'm not allowed near the joint. If I give my name trying to help people as a Mackenzie friend or an amicus curiae, I'm either silenced, thrown out of the court, or told to sit up the back and say nothing, or I'll be arrested.
They don't like you.
I've caused a lot of damage to the establishment over the past 20, 25 years, and they just don't let me play anymore.
Yeah, I can see why. And it's great that you're continuing to help us in the background, because we're going to need it, especially with, what we've gone through. I think so many people are fighting a lot of legal battles, and will continue to with what's to come, because they're going to be throwing a lot at us, and if we're not prepared, it's going to be a challenge.
If the last 3-4 years have not taught people to be prepared and opened their eyes to what's really going on in the world, I'm at a loss. If people still can't see that after what we've all seen and witnessed the last couple of years, you've got a lot of work to do in yourselves if you can't see what's actually going on, where this is headed. And if you're still believing that COVID's over as such, it's laughable. That was a test run.
Yeah. I doubt anyone who's on that page will be watching this, but if they are...
just for people, like we've all seen firsthand what's going on, what the agenda is, how they're slowly moving toward this, and it's been a gradual thing for many, many years. Since, before you and I were around even, Dee, this has been planned for, at least 100 years, if not longer.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's, this is just, they're playing out the plan, but because all the people like you and I are waking up and people around us, it's set back their agenda quite heavily, because they're relying on people's fear and ignorance to get away with this. And as people woke up, we're not fearful and they're not ignorant anymore. It's not working.
Yeah. It's exciting, actually. It's a
Look,
evolution. Evolution. Yeah.
maybe after 25, 30 years of talking about this stuff and screaming it from the rafters, I've waited a long time to see this happen. I'm stoked that people are finally getting it, you know. I'm not the crazy one anymore. I was like, shit, Zev was actually right, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great to see that. I've got friends like myself I've known for a very long time as well, and we've all been cheering watching people wake up. Like, can't believe it took this for people to realize what's actually going on in the world.
Yeah. Look, I'm not in your position because, I've only had 29 years on this planet. So, yeah, well done with your patience.
It's about as many years as I've been doing what I do, just about, do.
Wow. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, it's been a great chat. Thank you for sharing everything, answering all the questions, and I'm sure you will be inundated with a lot more inquiries now because I'm sure a lot of people would be wanting to go down those routes, with what you've
Well, that's
offered.
awesome. Look, if I can help one person learn, and they can help one more learn, who helps one more learn, who helps one more learn, doesn't take long before this really starts to spread and catch on to people. And that's what we're aiming for everyone to learn and help those around you to learn it as well.